So we know for elementary children that intellectual independence is what we're really helping them to achieve throughout their time in that elementary environment. And while a lot of schools have an additional adult in the classroom at the elementary level, they are not strictly required. So some classrooms don't have an assistant, and that's okay. But a lot of classrooms do. And if you are using an assistant in the classroom, if that's part of the school culture, then you have to carefully, define that assistant's role. They can be a valuable resource in the classroom in a number of ways. Assistants often have a lot more time than the guide to observe. So I highly recommend that assistants learn how to observe the children and practice some of the observation skills that we've been talking about, because they just have more opportunity to see things. So observation is a great role for the assistant. Another thing that an assistant in the classroom really allows to flourish is a going out program. Because if you have an assistant who's available to take children on a pretty regular basis, it is so much easier to get that program going for the children to go out when they need to go out. And the children then are accompanied by an adult who really understands the expectations of the classroom. And so they're actually, in some ways better supported that way when an assistant can take them out. Other things the assistant does throughout an average school day would be to take attendance, maybe greet students who arrive late and help them get settled into activity. They can really oversee the classroom cleaning process. The guide does need to pay attention to the classroom environment, but the assistant can check in on consumable supplies each day and replenish as needed. Check to see that the children have been doing their classroom jobs or, doing an extra bit of cleaning when necessary. Assistants are great for being able to help oversee recess and lunch and participate in those processes. But in general, the assistant isn't going to be working directly with children too much during the work periods. Remember, we want the children to develop intellectual independence. We want the children to start to become more self-reliant or to support one another. When we have too many adults in the classroom, it can just be so easy for the children and the adults to give the children ask for too much help and the adults give too much help. So for assistants during the work period, they should have projects that they need to be working on. So perhaps a certain area of the classroom needs a little bit more of an adult presence. The assistant doesn't have to go over and dominate that, but instead could be making a material for classroom use and just do that closer to those children. So it's not that the assistant won't participate in the culture of the classroom or some of the classroom management at times, but we want to be sure that it is really carefully under the guidance of the guide so that we're not interfering with the children's self-construction. Also, the assistant should not be interacting with parents very much. Of course, they can be polite and say hi and get to know them, but if parents want information, they need to get that information from the guide. And so really help assistants understand that when parents try to pump them for information at times, they need to say, that's really a question for the classroom guide, and get comfortable redirecting that. Because we want our communication with parents to be very clear and to come from one source. To really build a very strong assistant-guide relationship, it's going to take some time. So as much as possible, I encourage administrators to have assistants come in at least 15 minutes before the children arrive each day and be paid 15 minutes after they leave. That allows for those daily check-ins between the guide and the assistant, so the guide can outline, things that are needed, the assistant can ask questions, or they can share information about each other's observations that are going to serve to support the children better throughout the day. So it's got to be a lot of communication. And as much as possible in that relationship, try to get away from school together once a month or something and have a cup of coffee or drink and talk through how things are working in your working relationships so that you're serving the children. That's an important part of that relationship. When you develop a strong relationship between the guide and the assistant in the classroom, you can have kind of like, any, strong marriage where you can look across the room and communicate without speaking to one another, that you can trust one another to handle certain situations. That's the kind of relationship that will serve the children best and not get in the way of their development. So really take the time and effort on that relationship and help assistants know exactly what their role is and what their role isn't. Overall, they're not giving lessons too often or at all. Perhaps they're doing a little bit of, early reading support with some children if you've got a big influx of children who are struggling to read, but they'll need to be trained in how to do that. They might be supporting classroom management a little bit, but that should only be under the direction of the guide. Classroom management isn't the responsibility of the assistant. The guide has to lead that. The assistant can support that, but the assistant is not in charge of classroom management and the guide only gives lessons. That's absolutely not okay. The culture has to be nurtured together and the guide has to take the leading role because you're the one who's gone through training and the assistant can then support that. So it takes effort, it takes time to build that relationship, and it can be really valuable for the children when we've got a strong assistant and guide relationship and they each know their duties really well and all of it is in service of the children. So definitely take the time to work on that relationship and to maximize the value of having an assistant in your classroom.